Morning, everybody. I'll just kick off. Thank you very much for coming. It's good to be here with the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister O'Neill. This morning I can announce that Australia has used cyber sanctions powers for the very first time on a Russian individual for his role in the breach of the Medibank private network. As you might recall, more than 9 million records of Australians, including names, dates of birth, Medicare numbers and sensitive information, was stolen in the 2022 attack, and the majority published on the dark web. It was an egregious violation. It impacted some of the most vulnerable members of the Australian community. I can confirm that thanks to the hard work of the Australian Signals Directorate and the AFP, we have linked Russian citizen and cyber criminal Aleksandr Ermakov to the attack. Richard will speak more about the substantial efforts which have gone towards this, and can I thank the officials for their work on it. I also want to acknowledge Tim Watts, the Assistant Foreign Minister, who has worked so hard on this attribution and on these sanctions. The sanctions imposed are targeted financial sanctions and a travel ban. This will mean it is a criminal offence punishable with up to 10 years imprisonment to provide assets to Ermakov or to use or deal with his assets, including through cryptocurrency wallets or ransomware payments. This is the first time Australia's autonomous cyber sanctions have been used. It sends a clear message that there are costs and consequences for targeting Australia and for targeting Australians. These sanctions are part of Australia's efforts to ensure that we uphold the international rules-based order and upholding the norms of responsible state behaviour in cyberspace. As I have often said, we wish to use all elements of our national power to uphold these rules and to keep Australians safe and secure. We will continue to hold cyber criminals to account. Separately, and on another front, I can announce further sanctions. Overnight, Australia has imposed further counter-terrorism and financing sanctions on 12 persons and 3 entities who are linked to Hamas, Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. This is concurrent with further sanctions imposed on Hamas-linked targets by the United States, the United Kingdom and the European Union. I'm happy to take questions about that separate tranche of sanctions, which I have signed off on later in the press conference. And I'll now hand over to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Penny. And let me start by saying that the decision that the Foreign Minister has taken today is a hugely significant and unprecedented step. And it comes as a result of the significant efforts on the part of the Australian Signals Directorate in identifying Aleksandr Ermakov as a person who participated in the cyber attack on Medibank last year. Australians should take an enormous sense of confidence in the professionalism and skill that exists within ASD in this case, because it's an example of the work that has been able to be undertaken by ASD in a meticulous way over the last 18 months in hunting down Aleksandr Ermakov and being able to identify him as a part of the hack in relation to Medibank. We have here today Abby Bradshaw, who is the head of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, who can answer more technical questions in relation to what has occurred here. In undertaking these efforts, ASD has obviously worked very closely with the Australian Federal Police, but also our partners overseas, the FBI, the NSA in America, GCHQ in the UK. And again, this is a demonstration of how working with our partners, with these agencies, there is an enormously powerful effect which can be brought to bear in holding cyber criminals to account. And the sanctions that are being put in place on Aleksandr Ermakov today and publicly naming him will have an enormous impact on his activities and send a very strong message to cyber criminals around the world that we mean business. I want to acknowledge Microsoft in the work that they have done with ASD in being able to pursue this investigation. Most significantly, though, I want to acknowledge Medibank. Medibank have been incredibly open in the way in which they have engaged with ASD, and this has been fundamentally important in allowing ASD to do its work. And it's a really good example of how companies being willing to share this really sensitive information with ASD allows the investigations to occur in a way which has ended up with the result that we have today. That's a great outcome for the country, obviously, but it's a really good outcome for Medibank. And there are lots of lessons that both ASD and Medibank and AFP will have learnt along the way, and that's a great thing for Medibank. As I say, it's a great thing for the country in terms of improving our cyber security. I think over the last few years, we have seen the consequence of cyber attacks across the country. We've seen, in fact, across the world. We understand that this is one of the great challenges which faces our country and our economy today. But in the Australian Signals Directorate, we have an agency which is at world's best practice, and today's announcement is very much an example of that.
Thank you, DPM, and could I thank the DPM and the Foreign Minister. You'll be aware that one of Anthony Albanese's first decisions as Australian Prime Minister was to make a Cybersecurity Minister a cabinet position for the first time. This was a decision that was an indication of how centrally important this national security is to our government and to all Australians. And it's not just, of course, the appointment of me in that role that's changed the game here, but the Deputy Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister and all of the parts of government for which we are responsible, working closely together and being laser focused on this really important issue for Australians. This is a very important day for cybersecurity in our country. This is the first time an Australian government has identified a cyber criminal and imposed cyber sanctions of this kind, and it will not be the last. Medibank, in my view, was the single most devastating cyber attack that we have experienced as a nation. We all went through it, literally millions of people having personal data about themselves, about their family members taken from them and cruelly placed online for others to see. It helped us, I think, understand the enormous cost this problem will have to all of us as Australians if we don't step up to this challenge. It also showed us something about the calibre of people we are dealing with in terms of this problem on the other side. These people are cowards and they are scumbags. They hide behind technology, and today the Australian government is saying that when we put our minds to it, we will unveil who you are and we will make sure that you are accountable. I want to join these two ministers in thanking the Australian Signals Directorate and the Australian Federal Police. One of the most important things we have done about cybersecurity as a government is make sure that we get incredibly close collaboration between different parts of government. We talked soon after the Medibank incident occurred about setting up the Hack the Hackers task force. The announcement today is a direct result of the focus of those activities, and we were able to announce additional resourcing for Hack the Hackers through the cybersecurity strategy that we announced last year. I want Australians to know that the decision and the announcement that the Foreign Minister's made today is just one piece of the work that Hack the Hackers is doing. We can't always be very open about the work that Hack the Hackers is embarking on. But what I do want Australians to know is that I see and we see as a government that you are being affected by cybersecurity issues. Please know that the smartest cyber guns in our country work for the Australian government. They work for you. They work day and night in hunting down people who are seeking to do harm to Australians and debilitating them before they are able to do so. Today is a great credit to their work, and I want to join these ministers in thanking them for their efforts.
So we're happy to take questions. If we can focus to begin with on questions on this announcement.
Ministers, as I understand it, Ermakov is a member of the REvil hacker group. Now, is that correct for a start? Yeah. Now, under pressure from the US government, the FSB in Russia raided REvil and arrested a whole stack of fellows. I understand that Ermakov wasn't among those. So what use is these sanctions going to be, given that REvil is still in activity as we speak?
Yeah, so I might say a little bit about that, and I might invite Abigail Bradshaw to come forward and speak a little bit as well. So we know that there are a number of Russian cyber gangs that are at the heart of the threats that Australians are faced with. The Australian Signals Directorate and the Australian Federal Police are very focused on disrupting the work of these gangs, and they have enormous success in doing so. We know a lot about the people who are trying to harm us, and the sanctions that are being put in place today are just a part of the suite of efforts that we're undertaking in order to try to debilitate these groups. Part of the work that is happening globally is really important to this. The Deputy Prime Minister talked about the close collaboration we have with the FBI, with GCHQ in the UK, with other organisations around the world. What I've seen, even in the time that I've been Cybersecurity Minister, is closer and closer collaboration day by day in working out who is behind this and debilitating them before they can harm Australians. So why don't I get Abigail to come forward and just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Thanks, Minister. Thanks for the question. Well, REVIL is only one of many Russian cybercriminal syndicates, and those gangs we know are dynamic and have multiple partners. So a disruption of REVIL at one point in time doesn't cease its business. We know a lot about Mr Ermakov through our analysis, and what we do know is that cybercriminals trade in anonymity. It is a selling quality, and so naming and identifying with the confidence that we have from our technical analysis will most certainly do harm to Mr Ermakov's cyber business.
The practical effect is, given that he's clearly in Russia, we can't get at him, how will it affect him?
Well, I think Abby's probably answered that question in that, as Abby's just said, cyber criminals' calling card is anonymity. Aleksandr Ermakov no longer has that. We have named him for the first time globally, and his identity now being completely plain is on display for every agency around the world, but also anybody who is seeking to operate with him. So this will have a very significant impact on Aleksandr Ermakov.
I would just make the point the second part of the sanction that I referred to is financial sanctions. So it would be an offence, including to use or deal with his assets, including through cryptocurrency wallets or ransomware payments, or to provide assets to him. So there's obviously a financial consequence, as well as the point that Ms Bradshaw made.
My question is for Minister O'Neill and Ms Bradshaw. The last on the prevention of future cyber breaches. Last year, there was a Cyber Hub's pilot program review that found that particular program would not lead to significant uplift to prevent a Medibank-style data breach. What cyber uplift activity is ongoing in the APS and across government to prevent future Medibank-style breaches? And in the cyber strategy, it said that the cyber coordinator would be leading those efforts, supported by an office in Home Affairs. What is the composition of that office, and has that work been delayed with the changes with the cyber coordinator?
Okay, thank you. So uplifting Commonwealth cybersecurity is a major feature of the government's work, and that is because when we came to office, we didn't have any real tools in place to make sure that the Commonwealth government is doing the things that we ask of business. We impose plenty of cyber requirements on major Australian organisations, but no one holds more sensitive data about our citizens than the Australian government. So this is, as you would be aware, a core prong of the nation's new cybersecurity strategy. And for the first time, the Australian government will start to impose on government departments and pieces of government the same requirements that we put on business. This is not a small task. As any large organisation would know, the biggest cybersecurity issue that a lot of us face is IT infrastructure, which is ageing. That's not going to stop us from addressing the problem. And the Australian Cybersecurity Strategy has a very detailed plan about how we're going to go through this work. You're correct that the Cyber Coordinator has a very important role in this. We have Hamish Hansford acting in that position at the moment. Nothing about the Cyber Coordinator's work has been delayed as a consequence of personnel changes there. I can certainly assure you of that. The Cyber Coordinator has a dedicated team that sits beneath that position within the Department of Home Affairs. The position is well resourced for the job that's available. And I just remind you all, we didn't have a cyber coordinator under the former government. We didn't have a cyber security minister under the former government. So for the first time, we're actually going to tackle this task head on. But I just want people to understand this is a big one. The Australian government is a very large organisation. Our security is not where it needs to be. And this is going to be a big focus of our efforts this year.